Thank you everyone for coming, and thank you Philip for spending this precious time with us. I met Philip when I was at the college, I think 2 years ago, and some of the best conversations I had, I guess, were with him. So I'm very happy that we can spend this time together talking about wholeness in a moment like this. And just a few things. So the conversation will be in English, and if anyone is uncomfortable on speaking and wants to share something, a question or a comment, we can help translating. So if you want to write on the chat. We're going to be together for an hour and a quarter, maybe an hour and a half, depending how we are doing with the conversation. And Philip will open up talking a little bit, and then we'll open for everyone to share their experiences, and then we take it from there. But one thing just that I wanted to say before we begin is this is a space that is now being opened by Escola Schumacher Brazil. And I'm part of the group that sustains Escola, and I have Rita and Luis also here with me that are also part of the Escola. And we are offering these spaces, some of these spaces for free. But we are asking people that want and feel like and can to donate something for us. So we have an amount that we suggest, but it's completely open. So I'm gonna share the link for you with all of you in the chat here, and then feel free to collaborate or not. It's completely fine. I guess that's it. Philip, over to you.
So thanks everybody for joining. And the idea is that we're going to have a conversation about wholeness. And I hope, did you all manage to read the article, Counterfeit and Authentic Wholes? Did anybody read it?
I did.
All right, two?
Not all of it.
Okay. So let me just give a brief summary of the article, and then maybe as an introduction. So maybe then you can then we'll go around and discuss some of your responses to that approach. So so the idea of what is wholeness has been around for much of West, or much of civilization's time, and is very central to much of Western understanding. And Henri Bortoft was trying to bring out a quality of wholeness that you couldn't analyze, that you couldn't name. Can everybody hear me okay? And this quality of wholeness that Henri was trying to bring was not theoretical. It was not something that you could analyze or write down in a paper. It was something you had to experience. It was a process. And the position Henri was trying to bring, and that many philosophers have brought, is that you cannot understand a situation just by thinking or analyzing. There also has to be a component of experiencing. And from that experience, you're able to understand the parts, and you're able to analyze and have a finite expression of something. But without letting that experience happen, you're always living in a fragmented world that has no overall meaning. And this approach is something that you can practice, like with a plant or with color. So Henri talked about Goethe and his method of using experience to encounter something that one wants to study. So, for instance, if one was trying to understand the plant, one wouldn't begin by trying to analyze it into proteins and cells and genes and then try to build up to the whole plant. But one would try to explore the process of the plant and to understand the movement the plant was making, and in that way to arrive at in that article of Counterfeit and Authentic Whole, one would try to understand the primal phenomena of what is it that is happening that allows the plant to be in the way it does. So when I was talking with Bia and Rita about doing a session for Escola Schumacher Brazil, I thought it would be great to instead of trying to find the primal phenomena of a plant or a color, to try to explore what is happening in Brazil, what is happening with COVID-19, what is happening with this kind of collapse of old order, of old ways of thinking, of old institutions. And the way I'd like us to do that is by us trying to share our experience of how have we felt this change in ourselves. And what I'd like to do to begin is just to go round everybody, and if you say your name, and just for 2 minutes to talk about what has been your experience of the last 2 months, and try not to describe it from outside. Try just to describe it as you felt it, as it happened. So just try to feel the kind of process that you've been experiencing, and try to give that words in a couple of minutes. So if everybody says their name and where you're from, and then just for 2 minutes give some kind of very short account of your experience. So do you want to do you want me to tell who goes next, or do you want to just start when you're ready?
Maybe you can tell Philip. Oh, we have a volunteer, Maria Eugenia. Okay, yeah. Maria Eugenia.
I can start just to,
Yeah.
Because I think there's a sense of urgency that I feel. And I guess that's what makes me, just go, not only here in while you ask this question, but also in everything that's going on around me, this sense of urgency, of a different feeling of time in a macro sense, but also in a micro sense. So my name is Maria Eugenia. I'm in Belo Horizonte in Brazil. And I think this feeling of urgency, like I was saying, is interesting because before I think I have a feeling that it was there before, but now because things are so strange, so it's like the setting is so strange that I feel that my internal processes of urgency are very kind of like touching with a timeline of something bigger. And this is a feeling that I guess, or I did not perceive before, but I suspect that it was there. and that now all of a sudden it feels like they're touching, you know, this sense of urgency of the world, of the country, of what's going on outside of me and what's going on inside of me. So that's the first feeling. There's also a sense of simultaneous things happen. And this, I think you understood, right? And this being something that it's kind of like, it feels like a characteristic of something that is good and something that is bad. So what I mean by that is that the bad aspect of simultaneity is that so many bad news come at the same time and it feels overwhelming. It feels like I have no power and that there's no solution. It's, you know, I'm just gonna drown in all of this. And I see a lot of people, you know, when I talk to friends, you know. The good aspect of this is that when I kind of like start meditating and, you know, breathe, I can also understand simultaneity in the sense that a new world is already there. So I think there's something about the language that I've heard, you know, like in you know, social media and just the newspapers and even in groups that are, you know, very close to my heart like this one, that the new world is coming. And I kind of feel there's something wrong about this sentence because I feel it's already there, you know, and we're not so aware that things are simultaneous. And that gives me hope. It's kind of like the good aspect of things being simultaneous. I don't feel like drowning. I feel it's like, you know, it's already there. It has always been there, you know, and it feels like a support. So that's another thing. And the last thing, I don't know if I have time, but just because it's very like alive, is this idea of being in a familiar cycle. So, you know, the world's falling apart and people are in panic and I'm in panic and, you know, all of this. And I've woken up a lot of times in the morning feeling like I've been through this before because I'm a woman. And, you know, I don't know how this will sound, but like as a woman, and I'm very much in touch with, you know, my cycle. And this is what we feel in a month, you know, like it's like since ever I felt this. And it doesn't feel bad because I've studied this and I want to look at this and I want to honor myself as a woman. So it's strange because it feels familiar. It's like I know how to navigate this if I'm a woman. And that makes me think that, again, these timelines are touching because if patriarchy is something that I wish is ending now, and matriarchy, you know, this other aspect of a feminine is growing, this is what it's going to be all about. We really need to study, you know, like what it means to be in cycles and not as an idea of a crescendo or of a stable feeling. So just many different thoughts.
Yeah, fantastic. That's really perfect. So the idea of time being dominant, of everything concentrating, and that in some way that's natural, death and life. It's frightening only in a certain way, but from another way it's natural. So who next would like to share? And that was a very good example of not bringing outside things in, but describing the feeling, the movement.
I can read this one. My name is Patricia. I'm from Brazil.
Yeah.
I'm living in São Paulo.
Yeah.
And what I'm feeling, it's like a mess. So every day it's a mess. And everything, it's like learning everything again, or not everything, but a lot of things again. Being more in touch with myself and being connected in a different way with new subjects, with new teams. And so it's a lot of things coming true and not enough to manage all this stuff that is being showered all over ourselves. And we need to be strong to learn, and managing all these things. And being part of a lot of things, but not really knowing how to be in this place, because we are connected, but we are not connected. It's like being part, but how? How can I impact? How can I influence? How can I do something with all the things that are going on in Brazil mainly?
Yeah.
Besides the pandemic.
Okay, thanks very much. Well, you had another thing? That's perfect. So that feeling of disillusion, of having to learn, and yeah, that feeling of how do you orient yourself to have impact. So also, thank you very much. That's really great.
Can also speak a little bit.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
Victor speaking. I'm actually Chilean, but I'm living here in Brazil.
Right.
And what I've been feeling here is a lot of, I don't even know how to say it, but it's like, it was so sudden and so fast that it's like, the changes were so rapid that I needed to have some time for introspection and also to understand it further. And in that way, I think it had, for me, it has been a time for more introspection and make myself further questions about what are the essential things for me. But for me, it has been a more, it's like I feel disconnected with all what I see in the news, and what I'm living is so different that I feel this, I don't know, it's a bit frustrating, you know, because I see that so much is going on and it's so bad and everything, but it's not the reality that I'm living in my day to day. So I feel this, I don't know how to say it, but it's still something that I need to process.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Still processing. Thank you very much. So who next?
Hi.
Yeah.
I'm Luisa.
Yeah.
I'm from Belo Horizonte, where
Yeah.
Maria Eugenia is,
Yeah.
but I'm actually spending the last almost 3 months on the farm in Unai.
Oh, that's lucky.
So this has, yeah, I'm lucky. I feel really lucky. And this has been a time for me, first of all, mostly of getting in touch with myself, like really getting in touch with myself. And it has been an opportunity to align, I think, what I feel inside and what I'm doing outside, like what I'm doing of my life, because moving to here brought me the possibility to dedicate almost a good part of my time to sustainable agriculture, which is like a dream to me. So it's been like this great opportunity to be, I feel like I'm more, how do you say coherent in English? Does anyone know?
Coherent.
Yes, coherent with my inside and what I do outside. And then I just feel like this urgency for change that we all need to make, and to take the responsibility of change. And it's also an opportunity to make it. Although I feel there is an attempt to take things back as they were before all of this. but we can't lose this opportunity. So that's how I'm feeling now.
Great, thank you very much. So anybody else want to share?
I do want to share quickly.
Right. Yeah.
Something that is very alive for me from the beginning of the pandemic is the sense of not really knowing what is right or wrong anymore in very simple terms, like making a decision on going to the supermarket or not, and how that might affect the life of others. So I'm feeling very vulnerable in that sense of, not knowing how to, how to move. And then also trying to be with this paradox of influencing for a change, for a positive change, but being on the tension of feeling sometimes that I'm out of the natural movement of change. So in very basic terms, like when I have to talk to my parents about the consequences of their acts, that for me sometimes it's quite obvious what they, that they should be allowing this woman that works for them in their house to come work, but then for them there's a completely different rationale. And then I find myself having these troubles on feeling that I'm forcing sometimes. And so like this question of what is activism in a moment like this, how to best navigate, because there's this strong urge for change at the same time in the most basic things and then also in the broader things, but then finding it very hard when the time comes to not to be aggressive in a, like to force something.
Great. So, did you have more?
No, that's all. Well, there's also what I said to you in the beginning before we started, that I was rereading this article last night, and I was saying to Philip how every time I read it, it's probably the 5th time that I do, and I really love it, and I have something like a very strong and clear, it's almost like I can touch it, like this feeling of finding something really strong through the words of Henri Bortoft. But then this morning I woke up and I started to prepare myself for this conversation, and trying to then look again at the invitation that we put up for this time together on talking about wholeness in a moment of extreme fragmentation. And I was saying to Philip that then when it gets to actually, okay, how do I bring this to the social realm? I have no idea of how to start.
Yeah, so just to answer that a bit, that this wholeness is particular because you don't know what it is when you begin experiencing it. You have to experience it to understand it, which was a bit like what Maria Eugenia was saying, that that you have to live this thing. It's got its bad and good aspect, and it's very difficult to understand what that is. It's very intense, it's very concentrated. And the only way of really understanding it is by living it and going through it. And that's why you can't break it down into elements and say, right, we're going to do this in the lockdown. You have to kind of experience what it means to go through this breakdown. And then you get that feeling of wholeness, that feeling of understanding what it's about. But that feeling of what it's understanding what it's about doesn't come from something one can fix or analyze. It comes from very some qualities that are inquantifiable, like some of the things you've mentioned, that wholeness, when you read Henri's article, is like the good as opposed to the bad. It's like your hope. It's like your morality. Some said about going to the supermarket, how do you define your morality? So you can't analyze the picture into something that when you wake up in the morning, you know exactly what it is you're looking at. It's like this subliminal equation that you're trying to make. And sometimes that equation comes together and it tells you who you are. And so when you go through these processes of dying and rebirth, you have this feeling of losing all the ground underneath you because you don't have any elements by which to navigate. But that doesn't mean that there is no direction to follow, because something does impel you forward, even though what impels you forward is not yet crystallized into an outcome that is safe, that is clear. So all these tensions of good and bad, newness and uncertainty, disorientation and still processing, disillusion, all these tensions are something you have to kind of allow to be open and allow to be difficult and allow to be problematic. Because then in the very journey of what we're going through, only then will a resolution come. And that resolution is like something huge that incorporates everything into a resolving identity. It's not something that builds up from parts once abstracted and analyzed and understood. So this was in the article, this was the tension that Henri Bortoft was drawing between the counterfeit whole, which is something you can analyze, and you can write a paper about it, and it's very safe. You can say, okay, in this situation, these are the elements at work, and this is the psychology, this is the logistical expression, this is the spiritual expression, and it's a known quantifiable sort of equation and formula. And that's a counterfeit whole. But in the authentic whole, it's something you have to live in all its kind of paradox and it's all its movement that you cannot name, but is taking you into new places. And it's only through that movement that you get to a point where you kind of encounter, well, this is what it's been about. You know, maybe in a month or 10 months or 5 years, you'll be able to feel this is what it was about. This is what I experienced at that time. This was the transformation that happened to me. But at the time, you cannot kind of at the time you're kind of living snapshots. You're contributing something. You're contributing something that is the best of you, but it's not something that you know the outcome. So, so maybe are there other people who'd like to share that there's stories in that light of what is it that you feel is unique that you have to give in this time? What is it that what quality is it that you have that others don't have, that you'd like to that you're trying to express through this kind of time of novelty? And so one of the qualities, while we think about that, is that let's say if we're a scientist looking at a plant, we'll want to understand the plant. But in these, when you're looking through authentic wholeness, you're not trying to reduce the situation to something that is known. You're rather trying to realize something that is unknown. You're trying to do something that's never happened before. That only through the experience can you make this, the quality of this time, reveal itself. And so it requires a very different courage than in a time where you're able to oversee and control and measure one's opponents and one's competitors and one's colleagues in a way. So in this time, it requires that one really commits one's being and has the patience and surrender to be able to step aside, because one doesn't know what the impact of that commitment will be. So when one's trying to study a plant, one starts with describing what it is one knows about the plant. What is it? How does the plant grow? How does it, where are its leaves? How many leaves does it have? But then, and so one gets an understanding of what one knows about the situation. But the next stage in trying to understand, trying to encounter the plant, is more this stage of how the plant is able to transform itself in its journey through its different stages. So the plant starts off as a seed in the dark, then it grows small leaves and then bigger leaves, then it goes into the flowering stage, then it produces fruit and then new seeds. And if one tries to analyze that situation, one can't really appreciate the whole story of the plant. What one has to do is open up to that happening in time, by which this wholeness occurs, this moment of illumination occurs, in which the plant understands its growth and its development in terms of all the stages that it's been through. So in the same way, when we try to meet this unknown situation, there are certain things we know and take for granted. We know we're feeling uncomfortable. We know there's something universal that's happening because it's affecting everybody around the world. And we know that we have some capability to deal with it. But the next stage is trying to see, how can I commit? How can I add something to this process in order to bring it to a place that I would like to see it, a character that I would like to see happen in the world. And the very nature of wholeness is that we all have a freedom to experience it. We all experience this unique quality of this time. And we each have an opportunity to decide how to respond to it. So, so as a next phase in our discussion, it would be good if somebody could give an example of something you're doing completely differently now, that you would not have thought of doing a few months ago, but something is drawing you into this action. So also people who've spoken can speak.
I can say something.
Yeah.
One
thing that is new for me in this moment is my sense of priorities, what I feel, what is really important.
Yeah.
It's completely different from before.
Yeah. Can you give an example?
Well, yes, many examples in my daily life, what I choose to do professionally. There is a lot of things to do, courses and lives and texts and meetings, a lot of things, things I think that are important and things I think it's not adding something. It's an intuitive decision. How to clean my house and what to do for lunch, what to cook, and how to clean, the priorities for cleaning the house and take care of the plants. And there is something different with my body. Also, I feel more clearly my limitations. A lot of things like that.
That's great.
And also something that it's a little fun, but I have an expectation of the changing of the world, and each time I see that people is doing the same, I'm very sad. I'm very deceived, a deception with the. So that's it.
Yeah, so that's really good. That lots of people are doing that, re-evaluating what's important about little things like food and cleanliness and work, what balance, like how important food is and how important our daily rhythm is. So that's something that is kind of coming out from this movement, where we're left with our own judge inside us. Nobody is judging for us.
Yes.
There is no outside judge anymore that we can put above ourselves. So we have to come to our own kind of assessment. What is it that we would like to in this process that's still unfolding, what is it we would like to give? How would we like to shape it? So anybody else with some remarks?
I have something a little similar to Rita. I'm trapped in my house. I don't really have a garden or a balcony or nothing. And I noticed how much I missed the sun, because the sun does not shine inside my house. So one of the things I've been doing, which is ridiculous, is I've been laying in my window.
Right.
I actually have some pictures of me laying outside my apartment, and I actually hang from 1 meter or 2 to the ground.
Yeah.
The only place in my house where I can get the sun. And I only discovered it like 2 weeks ago, because I gave up searching for it. And one day I noticed that for a brief period of time, like 15 to 30 minutes, the sun shines on a specific window. And then I set myself to do it daily.
And what was the feeling like when you discovered that?
I was really, really, really happy, because I think the day before or 2 days before that, I was actually laying down on my floor trying to remember the feeling of the sun on my skin, and I could not.
Yeah.
So when I figured that it was there, it was quite nice.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a fantastic story. Because it's trying to find the light in a new way. It's not in the place it was. To anybody else? It's hard to beat that story.
Especially if you're feeling about sharing something more like pessimistic. I was resonating a lot with what Rita said about this falling back into the old and yeah, that I think that's a very important part of my whole experience. Like I can see like in the small gestures of people and what I'm doing with my daily routines, I can see this other whole emerging, like the glimpse of a different road, different living. But at the same time, there is this other part that I touch, like news from the politics, or even like in my daily routine, falling back in old patterns, old habits, that then it's like there isn't one whole, is there are like disputing wholes, like what Maria was saying about simultaneity, maybe like it's like a transition phase there. You have a bifurcation, maybe two options, and we can touch and have a glimpse of this different whole emerging. But also when you see other parts of it, you see this falling back into the old, or even worse, whole that was more connected to the old. So yeah, for me all the time is this, like when it started, the whole pandemic, there was a very strong sense of this opportunity of moving towards a different whole as a society, and then other gestures were made by people, like falling back here in the polarity of our politics and the violence and all that. So in the beginning it was like solidarity, we are together against this pandemic. Solidarity was a huge word in these gestures of like, we are united now, the old divisions doesn't matter, we can reunite as a society to face the virus and maybe build again our country as a whole. And then things were made that were, oh no, now we're polarized again, we are fighting each other again, we're back into what it was before. So I feel all the time this, and then come other gestures come and it inspire, bring life again to this other transformative whole. So it's all, for me, it's all like that, like all the time like that.
Yeah, thanks, that's very clear. So anybody else?
Which I think connects to what you said about we choosing the gestures we are doing and which whole we are helping to give shape to, probably.
Yeah, so if you look at the plant, say, then it's always facing death. You know, you see there's a frost when you put your broad beans out and they die. I mean, maybe not in Brazil, but in England. And there's always that fight. There's always that those two options of dissolution, that life can dissipate itself. There's nothing saying that life has a right to be. There's always that threat. And at the same time, though, there's this, in a way, the plant is daring to be. It's daring to find its form. It's daring to realize something, you know, that is an accomplishment of life. That it creates a flower, it gets fertilized, the bee gets pollen. It's beautiful sight, it creates seeds. And the perspective that Henri's trying to show in authentic wholeness is that it is the nature of life to manifest the whole. It's the nature of life to find insight in its kind of path. And that this insight that it finds, it is not possible to analyze that from before. Because if you analyze something from before, it's very safe, but it will not lead to anything new. And the very nature of this process of authentic whole is that one is going into something new, and all these emotions, these qualities of experience, this new kind of ways of seeing the world, they're all there, but at the moment, as somebody said, they're not yet coherent. They're not yet formed into something, into an identity, into something we know what's happened. And so it's allowing this state where something isn't yet what it is going to become. That kind of reveals or uncovers this natural movement of something finding wholeness, finding that life needs to find a form in which to be. Again and again through life, it's gone through periods where it hasn't known, where it's facing new situations. But it is the organizing principle of authentic wholeness that this searching is met by life, that something definite happens in which all the different participation and contribution becomes addressed and included in a form, in something that's visible. So, and if you look to not only the natural forms, but you look to our philosophy, our science, then it also upholds this idea of form asserting itself out of possibility, out of things that are still dispersed and disparate. So like when Bia was reading last night, there was this feeling of that suddenly you get that quality of how all these ideas fit together. But it's a fleeting understanding, because it's not, it's only there in as far as that's a possibility that exists, that we can understand there's something more meaningful in this time than just the immediate experience we're going through. So I wonder if anybody else has had feelings of hope or despair that isn't simply a personal hope or despair, but is something like in one's being, that one knows either there's something more or that everything is hopeless.
Maybe I can add something to that. I'm writing down many things. And a word that keeps coming up here in my notes is experimenting madness.
Yeah.
So this idea of madness, because I feel that's something that has to do with this, hope and desperation and hope and desperation, you know, kind of this movement that's collective, but it's individual, is the perception that things are crazy. And I've heard this word a lot. This is why this word, you know, I think I can offer this word to the group, because I also feel it in myself, because I've, like Rita and Beatriz mentioned, like I've been following the sun, and it seems kind of mad, though. Like if I sometimes I feel like there's a camera here observing me, and it's like, this person's gonna think I'm crazy because I'm kind of like, you know, sitting on a window, or, you know, just following the sun, and my routine is no longer about me, but it's about something beyond me, you know?
Yeah.
So I kind of laugh to myself, like, oh my God, if someone was watching me, this would be very strange. Which is something that I felt in other people talking about this. And I also found it really interesting that Beatriz said she has an image, like a picture, like to prove it, you know, it's like, I'm not mad, it's actually happening, you know? Yeah. And this idea, like for me, in terms of work, which I think is something beyond me as well, is that a decision, I've been learning to decide to work with intuition all the time, which is something that I was really much in conflict when I was in my last job, because I felt this impulse of working through intuition, and that intuition could help me take any kind of decision, but I would doubt myself, and I would think I was crazy because I worked in a very male dominant kind of atmosphere, and I would hear this literally being said, like, you are hysterical, you look mad, you know, this kind of like witch image, which is archetypical. It's not mine, you know, it's something bigger. And being here during this quarantine and hearing people out and hearing myself, it's been really interesting to practice this, to have the space and time to practice taking all decisions through intuition, because it's very subtle. It's not, it's, you know, like cooking through intuition, which is, I think, what Rita was saying. It's like, I'm still cooking. I'm cooking like I've always cooked, but it's something different. There's kind of like an altered perception. And yeah, I guess that's why I'm calling it madness, because, you know, experimenting with madness and this altered state of mind. I also meditate. So it's also something that I've noticed that before I used to meditate, and I'm, you know, I've meditated for a long time, and I work with Tibetan yoga and so on. And even though I used to say this to others when I would guide a meditation, I didn't understand until now, which is, we can be meditating the whole time. Like it can happen now, and there's only the now. And that kind of is madness, you know, to be now without, you know, this idea when there's someone that is clinically mad in front of you, they seem detached from reality, but they're creating their own reality at the same time. So what's the problem, you know? And yeah, just some thoughts, because I think I haven't understood it 100%.
No, that's really helpful. Yeah, when we're out of a context that we know, then who are we? We have to sort of discover ourselves anew. And that happens in many different ways. And so there's this search for the light, for the sun, which is really important. You know, how do we illumine where we are? How do we bring light into it? And so you know, I think that madness is in a way what's happening. It's like a collective madness, partly what we're in, that we have no sort of form how to behave. We're having to reassess everything. And so it's like we're cooking with ingredients we've never used before, but We have to believe we can make a beautiful dish. So anybody else want to share how moments of real hope or moments of despair that you felt inside you, that you feel were bigger than yourself?
I feel a lot of despair when someone was saying something?
Patricia, do you want?
Yes.
Go, Patricia.
I think I was really focused on my job. I was prioritizing few things, and now I'm in touch with all the things that are going on politically, economically, and I'm being more activist. I'm talking about, I'm putting my opinion, I'm sharing things with other people, something that I was not doing before. So in fact, I'm expanding more, trying to expand me more than I was doing before. So for me, I don't know if the word is hope, but it's more about acting more.
And Bia?
I was gonna say that I feel despair every time I read the news, that it's just, for me, contaminating me so much that I sometimes actively decide to be ignorant for a day or two before I can connect again to the news, because I feel completely paralyzed and hopeless.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I've hopefully invited you to enter this afternoon is the idea that, well, first of all, that being in a situation we can't understand or we can't analyze is not something you should that we should despair at. That this is a new situation for everybody, and including for the politicians, including for us, including for the nurses, people at work. And accepting that this situation is new opens up certain possibilities that we can try to see how we can contribute to the outcome of something that isn't yet realized. So if you imagine any process in nature, then there's no certainty that plant will emerge come the summer from the winter. But the plant kind of finds a path by which it can make use of all the elements of the rain, the sun, the air, in order to form itself. And so the path of wholeness, it accepts that there are resistances, that there are things standing in the way, but that there is something we can work towards, like Bia trying to find the sun, Beatrice, and finding a way to get there, completely ingenious. And so we need to do something similar. We have to find a way to get to the light, a way to get to allowing something beautiful to be born. And that's not an obvious way. It's not an obvious activism in the old sense of defying politics, because politics is also out of its depth. It's not in the waters it used to be in. So having that ingenuity to to find that, like with Beatrice, that was a crucial thing to find the sun. It completely changed the situation from one of deprivation to one of balance. And so, so the idea is that that nature naturally travels through these areas of the unknown, where it's leaving its old habit and its old routine. And what we are trying to do with believing in an authentic whole is that the form of life can show itself anew. So just like the plant finds its form, the form of the daffodil or the dandelion, if you have those plants in Brazil. But just like that, so the challenge is that we find our form of wholeness, of being anew in the world through this time of uncertainty. And one way or another, we're going to learn something completely new from this period. We're going to learn something because of a huge disaster, or we're going to learn something because of a huge learning. And so we should, we should feel ourselves a kind of instrument of that learning. What we want to understand is we want to understand what is the form of our humanness, of our culture, of Brazilian culture, that isn't decided by analysis or by the social sciences department, but is decided by experience, by going through the experience and finding that point of illumination, that point where suddenly we find that identity, that coherence, that is like finding a shore across a sea, where we can see who we are in a new way. And this is the invitation that Henri makes in his paper, how to meet the authentic whole of something by studying color or a plant. But what I'm suggesting is that also in this social situation, we are facing something similar. How do we find the authentic whole of who we are? And that requires a different type of courage, a different type of cleverness, a different type of finding the unknown solution. And so and so what I'd appreciate is that, and what I've appreciated in your participation this afternoon, is that as a group we turn a different light on the crisis. That instead of kind of measuring it from any particular viewpoint, so instead of measuring it from the viewpoint of popularism and people and how they can get ahead in society, or instead of viewing it from the standpoint of ecology and that we all share something that makes us a group, or instead of looking at it from the state of Brazil as a whole, politically, and all the history that Brazil has had, and how are you living that at the moment? That instead of taking a perspective at the beginning and trying to understand what's happening based on that perspective, that we go into experience we look at our experience of what's happening and then try from that experience, or to allow that experience to be shaped by something ahead of us that we haven't yet encountered, but something which can give form to what we're living. So, and that's what Henri Bortoft calls the authentic whole. That when there is openness, the whole appears, the form appears. You don't expect in the winter for the beautiful flower to appear in the summer. And so even when you're in a situation that seems dark or hopeless, then then there is this beauty of appearing, this beauty of something new being discovered through experience, and that becomes something that then lives in the world. So any more questions or?
Just hearing you now, Philip, reminded me of this musician I saw yesterday. Very quickly, he was doing a live session. And so we're facing this very big crisis in politics in Brazil. And then he said something that really struck me. He said, I am the minister of culture. And he said, you know, the nurse that is taking care of people in the hospital is the minister of health. And so there's something that really hit me on him saying that.
Yeah.
That I remembered now that you were saying like this last part.
I know, we should make you all the new cabinet. We've got just the right number of people. The Minister of Education is Rita, Minister of Dance is Louise.
I have a question.
Yeah.
In this sense, what are the other ingredients that differ humans from plants in this process?
Yeah. No, so that's a really good question. That the human is different because the plant is kind of building itself up into a whole. But the human condition is that we experience the whole. We have an experience of our whole situation. And our challenge is more the other way round. How do we express that wholeness in us? And we've got the choice whether we express it positively and creatively, or we express it dividedly and destructively. So, so the human we know the whole in ourselves, and our task is kind of to express it, like the musician yesterday, or reading the paper, or tidying the house, however we do that. And we have this choice that how we can be completely destructive with that understanding of the whole. There is nothing stopping us at all, like in the Bible, in the Garden of Eden. But at the same time, we can be creative, and we can shape something together that's really beautiful and true to who we are. So it's kind of the other way round with us than the plant. But I would say it's a similar challenge that we're still trying to understand wholeness, and the plant is also doing that, but in its challenge is more physical. How does it grow itself? Ours is more kind of ethereal, in the realm of choice. Any more questions?
I had a question regarding some comments that some of you made. Is it more like thinking or doing? Like,
yeah, very good question. Yeah, so definitely more like doing. And that, you know, there's been a whole wrestle in philosophy and science. There are those who want to make science and philosophy theoretical and about thinking. But there are others who've said, no, philosophy is always practical, it's about doing. And Henri was definitely in the class of people who was saying that in doing, one uncovers the thinking part, one uncovers the pattern of something. But one has to start with doing, and then the pattern will follow. So definitely it's about doing and practice. Very good question.
thanks. We're in a situation now that's a little bit more difficult to be doing a lot.
Yeah, that's right.
We need to be at home, but
yeah. But you can be imagining you're doing. Yeah, so it's just been really good to be part of this conversation, and yeah, hopefully that the whole appears. That's the whole form shows itself.
I have this feeling every time I have a conversation with you, I leave with a mix of feeling a lot of hope and puzzlement at the same time.
Yeah, that's right.
Something shaken and I don't really know what it is, but it's a good feeling. Thank you very much, Philip.
Okay.
I always enjoy a lot your...
No, thank you very much.
And thanks everyone for also joining. I was going to ask, is it okay for everyone if we share this session?
No problem.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. So we're going to put on our YouTube page. So I know some people wrote to me saying that they couldn't make it and they were asking if we would be, you would be okay. Good.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.